make a response video to Tom's video here on the snowflake method in product development. And so in doing that, I had a few thoughts. So I'm going to try using Miro and doing some sketching. Let's see if it'll let me do this. I think I was looking at the objective of the entire video, and it looks to me like the objective is to demonstrate that the snowflake method provides a tool to build core capacity and then expand when faced with a complex set of internal and external wants and demands. And that is most easily typified by the use of a triangle that includes a product that people understand. Let me thin this out. And say understand. I'm having to use my, is there a type tool? Let's do the type tool. So there's understand, there is what they demand, and there is, and this is basically it fulfills the promise that the customer wants. They understand how to use it and they want it enough. And so this is kind of the premise of the whole thing. And the idea is that we can take this and add triangles on top of triangles to make them ever more complex product and or service, and to diversify the wants and needs. So I would say there's probably wants and needs out here. These are kind of in the ether, and then they would, wants and needs would then point to the demands that people must be realized through understanding, and that they understand the needs and they want them enough. And so there's this other diagram that's used to create this picture of the market. And that diagram looks like, let me get my drawing tools back. It disappeared on me. Here's my eraser, here's my, okay, so we had this other diagram, and this one starts with the market on one side, and then it has business on the other side. And then it has desirability, and viability, and usability, and usability. And so one of the things that I'm going to add to this diagram is over here, I'm going to say the top half is going to be a willing to scenario on both sides. So the idea is that the company viability is simply a willing to scenario. So the costs are low enough and the return is high enough that the company is willing to do that. On this side, we've got another willing to right here, and I want to see if I can copy and paste. I can. So I've got a willing to over here, that's desirability, so that the customer wants it and they're willing to make the purchase or use the product. And then down here, everything is about can. So usability is they have the capability. they can use it, they're capable of using it. And feasibility is another capability statement on the side of the customer. So I'm going to put that over here. So these are can items and these are willing to items. And so my challenge with this kind of model is that the market is massive and complex and the business is small in relation to that. So if I were to just say, okay, well, what about footwear? Let's take a look at you know, people that wear shoes. We've got this market over here. And the market is it's an odd-shaped market. It's not a direct market, and it also has some permeability. So we could have points that are inside and outside of what we might consider to be the main market. So it's complex, and these are people who let's put a definition up here. People who wear shoes. And it's not all inclusive of all people because not all people wear shoes. And then we can say, okay, well, we've got people that wear athletic shoes that are inside of this market. Let's say they're a good portion of that. And then let's attach some companies to this picture. So let's say we've got, so our line for the divider between the market and a company is really right here. And so this line is squiggly and this line might be straight. And so let's call this one Nike. So let's say this is Nike type. And but then let's also say that we're going to put Adidas on there, and let's put Adidas over on a different side of this market. So let's say this is Nike, but Adidas as a world generator is also a bigger relationship to this market than Nike. And then within Nike, we could do a little subsidiary, which would be, skateboard shoes or something like that, or, a particular type of athletic shoe. And so we could have, these smaller bits within larger bits. And so the willing to-ness within each of these companies is going to be dependent on their scale in relation to the market, in relation to which pieces they are interested in serving. So, Adidas may have this big portion over here of the world, and Nike may have this portion of the world, and there might be some overlap, and so this area is going to be the more competitive. This might be soccer shoes. There might be some soccer shoes in here, and golf shoes might be over here, and mostly at Nike, and basketball shoes might be mostly in Nike, and soccer shoes are going to be, except let's say that the actual soccer shoe marked portion is like this, and maybe there's some other people that are in here that have a little tiny piece of it that are also in this competitive area. And so when I start to think about the market in relation to the company, this seems like too logical and too simplistic in terms of a model and what the people actually want and what people actually need. So there's people that are out here that are never going to be truly touched with the needs that they have in here, because we're talking about mass-produced product. So I think, this whole premise of this simple triangle boils it down to a the triangle only works if there's a single customer or a single set of needs across multiple customer profiles that can be served. And so, we talk about, testing a new product, and starting with the lowest viable. This is another way of saying smallest viable product. Possibly, so that might be a way that this is describing smallest viable product, that it needs to meet these different criteria, and that then we can make a more complex product as we go. And so I think that complexity in design comes from real complexity in the market, which we see with a scribble like that, and the gaps in the information or understanding, and basically the complexity also comes from gaps in understanding, and those gaps in understanding come from missing information or poor insight development. So when in the initial video, there's this drawing of this kind of a thing, and over here we have promise on top, and down below we have solutions. So solutions are going in this direction and promise is going in that direction. So this is the customer wants and needs, their demand, what they need from the company, and these are the solutions that are being presented back by the company to the people, or let's say the market. This is the promise that people want from the market. These are the solutions from the market, and then the customer has a variety of choices within that. And so to illustrate that, the way I would draw it is I would say we have a promise coming in, that people want, and that results in insight. So I'm going to copy this one and paste it over here. It's scaling like crazy. So you got promise coming in, and then I've got insight over here. This is the insight that is discovered by evaluating the market and trying to understand what the promise is that they're wanting. And then from there, we have this proliferation, because the insight isn't the solution. The insight is the instigator for solutions. And so from an insight, we can have many different directions. So you and I might come across the same insight about customers, and you might have one solution that comes to mind, and I might have another. We might each explore 3 to 5 different solutions and come up with different iterations and ways of serving that particular market. So I see the promise coming into hitting an insight, and then the insight becomes a kernel, but the kernel is not the product. The kernel is not the product, it's not the solution, it's not a way of thinking. So the way I break things down is into products, services, and ideas in terms of what we can market. And the market for ideas is probably one of the biggest markets that's out there. So in that regard, so we got promise coming into insight, we got insight blasting off into solutions. And let's spell it right. And then let's also draw some dots for solutions that are not discovered. So there's plenty of latent solutions that are in between different things that people in this area, they either cannot do it, they're not willing to do it, or they are unable of discovering it. And so that might be another thing to add to this. So I mean, so outside of this, we could put unable to discover. And the unable to discover could be through lack of information. It could be through lack of, lack of info. Could be lack of insight. It could be lack of effort. Lack of depth. Lack of breadth. Either you don't follow a particular line far enough, a line of thinking deep enough to get to the insight, or you don't expand your thinking enough to capture the vein that then you could go deep on. And so when we have this kind of map, and we can say that the poor product design, so these solutions could be good or bad. So let's give them an arrow up or an arrow down. So all of these solutions could go one way or the other. And so poor product design could come from real insights, but poor conversion to a solution. They could be a positive conversion to a solution, but a poor execution. And so I think in the video, can I get back to the video? Yeah, in the video you get into this work where you're starting to look at the market and marketing, and can they discover the product? Can they, how do they find out about it? Where does it reach them, and so forth. So I'm going to exclude the marketing piece of it to just focus on the product, because I feel like the question here isn't about understand, could be reach, but I feel like this excludes, this is in a bubble where we assume that the person has seen the product. They see it, and then they understand it, and they want it, and they have demand for it, and that the company is going to do this in a small way first. They're going to do this with some product surveys, with some product experience testing, and different usability kinds of things before they put in the marketing effort. And so I feel like this is still within the product development realm and isn't yet to the point of how do we get it out into the world. It's like, how do we've identified a market that we want to reach, and we've selected some people from that market, and we've produced this thing with 3 legs. Three-legged stool will stand up, and then we want to have them experience it. And so, the issues here could be all of the above, in terms of, the people experience it, and they could reject it for all of those and further reasons. I think that this is a helpful model, but I also think that it assumes that I feel like product development in general has this challenge where it distills the consumer profile into almost a robotic-like icon. So we're producing something to get the human computer to engage with the software in a particular way. The software could be a religion, the software could be a computer system, the software could be um, a bunch of products that work in a certain way, um, and that people think about and utilize in a particular way. And I feel like that um, reduces and removes the human component. Um, in some of my work on writing about the storyteller tactics and the storyteller archetypes, I highlighted that the archetypes can help diversify the number of people, the different types of user profiles, and to start to understand how different profiles might respond to and interact with what's going on in here. And I think that's one of the reasons for the kind of complexity that that gets pointed out in this kind of hierarchical map of the product design that's in here. I want to find that bit if I can. Here we go, it's at the end. So the idea is we have all this kind of layered complexity with internal and external needs, and that's because there's so many different personality profiles that are going on, and that those personality profiles are impacted by the pressures that are on them outside of them as a particular profile. So somebody can be very easygoing in their own life, but in their work environment they can be very strict, and that's simply because they are afraid that they don't want their easygoingness nature to seep through and be displayed as weakness. And so I feel like a lot of these different kinds of complexities and differentiators can't be excluded. It may be that it's not possible to exclude them because of this kind of complexity, where social realities, as well as the relationships of the company to other companies. That's a mitigating factor in relation to the market, in relation to people that are unserved or underserved by the products that are created. A good example of that would be somebody in a wheelchair or that is blind. Those individuals are often outside of the product service. So for example, you take a simple three-legged stool model and you apply it to Uber or Lyft, and those business models came in on a reductive structure of serving an audience, and they assumed the audience has two legs, two eyes, they can see, they can hear, they can walk, and they rolled this out into the market, destroyed the taxi industry, which was regulated to have a certain number of vehicles on the road at all times that could serve wheelchair users. And what happened? And Lyft and these companies also created a strict regulation about how the car needed to show up. It needed to be clean. It needed to not be dented or scratched or any of these different kinds of things. Well, usability devices dent and scratch and are hard to maneuver and get into vehicles. And so Uber drivers and Lyft drivers were driving away when they would approach and see somebody with a mobility aid, including a wheelchair. And so now you've used a reductive model to destroy a complex industry that was regulated to serve a broad array of needs, and now those needs are no longer met because of the model of smallest viable product and so forth. And so I feel like for companies that are trying to create and initiate things, this helps them frame it in a way that they can sell to investors and to other people. But I also feel like that one of the problems. So Tom wrote an article recently about helping to pull the plug on a startup, and the startup had been acquired by a large corporation. It was a subdivision, and the corporation had to decide how much energy they wanted to put into that subdivision. And the problem was that the founders had been using a reductive model of mapping their product and service, and that they simply chose to disregard the implementation ramp that their customers would have to take on to adopt their solution. Their solution was better, but they were putting all their energy into putting little puzzle pieces onto their product, when the big puzzle piece of how is this going to integrate and how much work and effort is it going to take for the market to adapt to that. And so that would be an instance where the market has a need, but the company is out here waiting for this attachment to happen, and the attachment comes near but never quite attaches. And so the market isn't, so the company is not actually attached to the market. The company is attached to its idea. Let me just handwrite this one. But the idea doesn't fully connect with the realities of what's going on out here. And so this is left floating, it's never attached. And some company says, hey, I want to snatch this organization that's connected to this idea. And so they buy that and they bring it into their company, but it's never really connected to the market. And it's not going to connect to the market unless they spend, let's say in here, this is 60 million. And they expected to make 100 million. And so they're not prepared to make this investment. And so I think that so this issue of should we do this? Tom recently wrote an article that said, no, we shouldn't do this. We should look at why organizations get built around things. What are the circumstances that arise when a company gets built around an idea and inflated when it has no capacity to connect to the market? We've seen that in medical testing. We've seen that in several other categories where actually the valuation of the company has become $1 billion. It's become a unicorn and has zero connection to the market. So I think that, to me, there's a real challenge in this smallest viable product and this whole way of thinking in terms of ignoring the complexity and saying, okay, we're only going to focus on a nugget, because the nugget is only focused because it is winnowed down to the complexity and said, okay, there's only this portion of the market that really matters. This is the portion of the market that really matters right now. If we can make something that works with this market, we get this little triangle here. Now we need to build something for here, and it needs to be this more complex snowflake. And then if we're going to get out here, we need this more complex snowflake. That's not always the case, and we can see that through product development, like the cell phone industry. When cell phones were emerging, one of the cases that I presented when I became a department director for design management was looking at the types of phones people would the phones that people would purchase. And a lot of people would purchase the most complex phone because they felt, I need the phone with the most features. And then the complexity of the features were so difficult that it was uncomfortable for them to use. It was eating up more of their time than it was serving them. And so they would reject that phone. They'd buy the simplest phone. The simplest phone didn't do enough for them. And then they would migrate to something in the middle. And this was pre-iPhone. And so you didn't have a visual structure. You had to work through buttons and a little screen and so on and so forth. And so what companies would do is they would actually make 3 different levels of product. And this one was the big star because, so this is the star where they're making their money, but people buy it and they don't really end up liking it. And then they either downgrade to this or downgrade to this and then upgrade to that. And so I think that product market fit is the question of the usability. So how many spikes need to be added to this to move from this concept to something that's going to be suitable. And a small company doesn't have to serve every single market. A big company has to think about accessibility and a lot of these other kinds of issues from the ground up. And so I think this simply has a challenge of how do you include enough complexity at the launch that you're really serving enough people that they're actually served, and does that negate the complexity of real life that's going on in this big messy world that we live in that doesn't really fit into a simple diagram. So that's my feedback in general to the presentation. I'm very interested, Tom, to see your reaction, and I hope some other people will take a look at it too. So thank you for presenting that. I enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed thinking through what my response would be, and I look forward to your feedback.